Okay, so this week I want to take up a few textures. So the pictures I've sent are two textures. One is a rope texture, and the other one is not really textured, but rendering of fabric. So this is something that you will often see in still life. There will be usually a pot of something, some fruit or vegetables, maybe some flowers. Then there would be some kind of fabric that is just laid out in a very messy manner. And I don't know why they do it, because I suppose to appreciate the folds of the fabric. But half the time I keep thinking, can I just come there through the painting and just smooth everything out? You put a lovely tablecloth there, keep it smooth. I keep thinking some cat is going to come by and pull at it and the whole thing is going to crash down, so it keeps me very tense. But fabric is wonderful to sketch. I love it. It is so simple. It's just one folded dimension. It has really nothing to speak of. Even if it doesn't have any print on it, it can still be very interesting to sketch. So we'll start with the fabric. We won't be able to finish the whole fabric, but I want to show you how to illustrate it using basic shapes. And then we will go to one of the knots where there is a texture, and it is almost as if it's a fractalized texture, which means that you have something that is almost like an elongated cylinder. It's like a fiber which is made out of multiple fibers, which then in turn are also made out of fibers. So it's like a progressively increasing or decreasing texture of the same thing. So that's very interesting to make. Now, in terms of application, there are several places where these things can be used. Fabric can be used when we are making people or people illustrations. So even if you are doing something like travel illustration, you want to show a person over there, a little bit of understanding of how folds and shadows and maybe sometimes the garment structure works, you can easily illustrate that. Same goes with portraiture. And for ropes, a rope texture is good to study, and then the same principles can be applied to things like baskets, or to even anything that's woven, carpets. So anything that requires crossing over of things, that same knot texture logic can be utilized. So if you're, say, making a basket of fruit, for example, that basket can be the highlight of the illustration, especially if you've got boring fruit like pears or something. Then you've got one smooth texture, and then you've got the texture of the basket that can make it look interesting. So today we will be using just a pencil. Use a nice 2B pencil. Keep it well sharpened. Keep your sharpener nearby. And also keep your eraser nearby. It's a very unusual request. Normally, I keep asking everyone to throw the eraser out, but if you have thrown it, please retrieve it and keep it nearby. We will be using the eraser. I will also show you how to use this eraser. You don't need to have it today, but I have recently acquired this. I don't even know what it's called. So it's called a mono zero eraser. It's a hard eraser so that you can make very sharp lines. This works very well with charcoal sketching, but to some extent, this also works for our pencil sketching, where we can use the eraser to draw negative lines in a sense. So if you want to make a highlight with sharp edges, this is the one we go for. And of course, the usual one is the flexible eraser, the kneadable eraser, which cannot usually make very sharp edges, especially if you're working with a pencil. So this one will use to make just lighten a certain area and maybe make fuzzy lines wherever they're applicable. One thing that I'm not using today is a paper stump. A paper stump, I think we've used it during the art quarter. That is used to smooth the pencil shading, but I personally don't like that texture too much. but that's just a personal choice. A lot of artists do use the paper stump to smoothen out and make the illustration more realistic. So I do recommend it. Try it out before you reject it. We are going to try to control the pencil shading so that we can get that evenness that our realistic illustration needs without having to resort to paper stump. Now, I'll just show you the pictures that we have, and I'm going to speak a little bit about how drawing or shading these, or practicing these particular items can be a great exercise for more advanced topics. So here we have a smooth texture with a light that gives us smooth shadows as well as very hard shadows. The values in this picture are have a good range. So values would be the number of grays that you get in the picture. A picture which is high contrast will give you a lot of light and a lot of dark in the same picture. So the range or the difference between the lightest light and the darkest dark is huge. That is what makes a picture a high contrast image and generally very sharp. So images like these are useful to as a study because it helps us to break down shapes into just lines and proportions without the encumbrance of making this look like a person, for example. It's the same requirement even if you want to draw a face, but a line drawn wrong in a fabric will not look as bad as a line drawn wrong in a face. Unfortunately, when we're drawing faces, we get so paralyzed if something goes wrong that I think it somehow arrests our objective sense. So you tend to be so judgmental about the output that you tend to not proceed with the clear objectivity. I think this is akin to batsmen who get out at 99 runs after lots of overs of not scoring at all, being on 99 just because of they're so petrified that the next ball they could be out. It's the same thing. You are so afraid of goofing off that you tend to be overcautious, and then in all of that, the illustration becomes flawed and the entire experience does not become very enjoyable. So my tactic is to do that exercise on something that's inanimate. You don't mind if it looks a little odd. It doesn't mind if it looks a little odd, and you can proceed to just build your muscle strength and observation. So we'll start with this. And before we begin, I just want to show you how to break this down into shape. Everything that we do is about proportion, getting the right proportion, the right distance of objects in the right place. So in this particular case, as with everything else, we are first going to start with just lines. Start with a line that you can see. And work with a visual proportioning. Based on how long your first line is drawn, the rest of your lines can be drawn. Now we can also go back and make an overall shape of the object, which is like this maybe. Go to all the four corners and visualize it. So this is like the shape of a diamond. Once you're comfortable with these proportions, you can break this up and draw smaller shapes. In a sense, we are doing something like sculpting on paper. first making the broad strokes and then the details. This helps you to be sure that your proportions are more and more accurate. These are not going to be your final lines. So in case you draw a line that is too long or too short, you can always make the adjustment as you come to making the details. But when you are making these lines, these are the lines that you hold on to. These are like your training wheels. You hold on to these lines and then you make the lines which are more perfect. Once you know this, once you've drawn this, then we can move to the smaller lines. Then we can also make lines with curves. Like, I hope this curves now. I still haven't figured out how this works. So you can make these adjustments over here. Now, each of these shapes that we've drawn has got some kind of proportion. I see a certain proportion, you will see a certain proportion. And I want you to trust what your eyes see and then be able to draw it. I'm making a screenshot of this and I'll share it on the group. I'll share it separately with you, Sharda, so you can refer to it and then start the drawing. So this is just an example. This is not necessarily the only way you can do it. These are not necessarily the only lines you can draw. So I want you to experiment with what lines you think you need to draw these better.
Aditi, so like last time, we begin with these reference lines and then erase them eventually.
Eventually, we'll erase them.
If
Yes.
required.
Yes.
Bit wherever.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Make your
What paper is this? Aditi, I have the watercolor paper. Should I use a smoother one?
use a smoother paper, yeah. You
Okay.
don't have our drawing book, Shada?
Now I don't have.
Okay. At some point, then just order it now, then you just keep
A
it.
drawing book.
Yeah, or just get a drawing book which has simple cartridge paper.
Okay. Right now I have some smooth paper. I'll use that.
All right. So the size of this illustration also should be about so much. Don't make it too big, because if it is too large, then you should be able to make more details more accurately. So we don't even want that. Just make it about this large. This would be about the size of the image that you see on your phone, maybe, or maybe slightly larger than that. And if you're looking at the reference image on an iPad or something, then it might be, the drawing we're making will be slightly smaller than that. So start with the red lines first. Every line has got a particular angle. So if this is the top point, then from there, just look at the line and see whether that line comes to 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. I think it's mostly somewhere between 7 and 8, closer to 8. Now, based on this line, this becomes the first line that you draw the unit. You will draw the rest of the lines. And you will see that you can more or less tell where the line should end, how much longer it should be, just by a visual measurement. And trust the visual measurement. You might think it is looking too small or too far or whatever, but more often than not, what you see first is correct, and then you apply your brain, and then everything goes wrong. Now, this is one technique that it's just a matter of knowing. It's like an academic technique that can help. But like I keep saying, this is not the only technique, and I personally rarely ever use this. I will start off with this, the second part. Now that I have drawn this, what I'm doing now is what I normally begin with. So I will start drawing one part of the fabric and then build everything from there. So if you've drawn the red line and blue line, then let's move to, drawing some of these other lines. Again, just draw them straight.
Please, can you either focus or make it a little darker?
See this? Now,
Yeah.
you can see it? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh. Every time my hand comes up, it goes out of focus. So I'll try and draw from far away. Now, don't be afraid to draw multiple lines, and please do not draw your lines like this. Keep your hand down and draw a line with your fingers. So if you are drawing, if your hand is in the air and if you're drawing, you might find that your lines are unsteady. So this is the movement that you do with your hand. But I'm going to recommend holding the pencil a little far away and away from the illustration, and make your lines in short, firm bursts of lines. So you will have multiple lines, and you will be able to make adjustments. If you think there are too many lines, today we have an eraser, so you can erase. Because otherwise the lines can become a little confusing. I don't know why it's not focusing. Yeah. Here's a line for the shadow. This is a line of a fold. And just see how long it goes. So it's going beyond the line that I have drawn. So I must have got this proportion a little wrong. Maybe it's narrower and longer. The lines that you can't see because they're obscured by the red and blue lines, you can draw later also. So when you are drawing these in a place like this, it can be a little confusing, or even over here, where the fabric has been folded and then you have a fold coming out of another fold. So draw the prominent line that you see, which is that horizontal dark line. Then there is something happening over here, almost like a V shape. Draw the V shape. And then from around the V shape, you have another inverted V shape. And then this comes around. So there will be some places where the lines can look very complicated. So my technique for doing that is just to almost speak to the line and say, okay, where are you going? What is your angle? What is your length? And if I want to draw another line behind you, should I draw it behind you? Should I draw it above you? Usually you get the answer. So when I used to sketch as a kid, I used to get very confused with these fabric folds. What is going where and how is everything coming out? And I found the paintings of these classical artists almost magical because they could do fabric so well. I think even today, a lot of people are fascinated with the rendition of fabric on classic paintings because of the whole play of light and dark and so many, um, I guess, shapes coming together, which are there but yet not there. Like, for example, the folds are there, but they're not there. You can see 3 dimension, but you can't see any gap over here. All these things that makes stuff very confusing. It is all about distances. So keep your eye on the distances between lines, the angles. And if you feel you are doubting, you don't know whether or not you're drawing the line correctly, at this stage, just draw whatever you see as right and let it just be. Because a lot of the analysis that you would like to be able to do about the correctness of the line will only happen after the line has been shaded and the picture has been completed. So in many cases, the learning of from an illustration comes post-mortem after the deed is done. I'm going to shift the light a little bit. This is casting the shadow of my camera. Okay, if you're happy with the lines that you've drawn, then we can move to the original image. So shift back one image, and now we can start shading. So start with the corner that you find you can shade. I can find this shape over here, easy to shade. It's like a teardrop shape with a sharp edge on top, and then the edge of the fabric comes down. Draw a little bit of the line at a time. Right next to this fabric, you have, this teardrop shape, you have another teardrop shape which goes slightly higher. And now this part is not really as dark as the first part. So it's fuzzy. So sketch or shade over there repeatedly with medium pressure. Don't put too much pressure there. We will not have too many sharp corners except at the edges over here. So make sure that you are making nice rounded corners. And see how simple things like this line comes straight, but turns slightly inward because of the weight of the fabric. And then we have nice rounded, very gentle compound curve. And then another fold with two bends on this side. After you've drawn this line, quickly check your proportion. And here now I'm going to erase one line. And I'm going to show you the shading process. There's a very subtle shade right here. So what you ought to do is start with shading this lightly, just barely touching pencil to paper. This is the practice we want to get in. It's a very smooth action, and it should just be your fingers moving. If your whole hand is moving, this shade will become very heavy, and you might also see some pencil marks in it. You want to avoid that. And you want to also not rotate the pencil too much. So even a subtle movement like this may make your shading a little less smooth, because then you'll start getting lines. If you can master this technique of shading, just gently rubbing the paper with the tip of your pencil, you can sketch absolutely anything with even tones. So that is the second part of sketching to master. The first one is to be able to draw everything in proportion, and the second one is to be able to render it in the right tones and values. So the rendering bit, you often see the shade accurately, at least in sooner rather than later. Sooner than the ability to draw comes the ability to recognize the tone. But rendering it requires a certain amount of muscle strength. The edge of this fabric is frayed just slightly. So this is the point where you can make a slightly fractured line. Here we have two lengths of fabric. So there's a division. Are you able to do this? Any questions so far? Any help you need?
Aditi, can you send me the pic without the lines?
Yes. Sorry, I didn't realize I haven't sent that to you.
No problem.
I'll send you the rope as well. In this second part, we have slightly deeper shades. So this is how I would recommend you do it. First, I think I need to sharpen my pencil. So just check if your pencils are sharp enough. If not, this is a good point to sharpen it. After the drawing bit, it might have become a little blunt. Even though the pencil is sharp, we have to try very hard to not touch the sharp edge down, except to make sharp lines, and that will be done right in the end. So here in this case, we have a slightly sharpish shadow in a particular shape. So mark that shape and start shading again very lightly, exactly like we did over here. Now, when you're doing this, the intention is to layer one line next to the other with almost zero overlap or such a tiny overlap that it's not visible. With even just this detail, you will already be able to see the three-dimensional nature of the fabric. Once you have shaded this in a light tone, then we start building in a medium tone into it. Eventually, of course, you will directly go to the medium tone, but in the beginning, till you know where your medium lies, it's good to start with the lighter side and then go to the darker side. This time round, when you're shading, again, maintain the same amount of pressure, but change the direction in which you are shading. As you can see, I'm shading across both areas as if they were one, because I want to get in that darker tone in both places. Now both have become the same shade. And now comes the differentiator. I will draw that sharp edge between the two folds, and then just the smaller part, the smaller curve will get the deeper shadow. But that too in only a crescent shape as I see it. And the edge is really fuzzy. So fuzzy edges are made by just shading on the edge that you've made and making it a little less sharp. So here are the two different shades that you will, or shapes that you will get. One is a shading or shape that you will shade, which does not have a defined edge. And the other one where you do have a defined edge, it's much sharper, and you will be able to create an outline and then make the shadow. The same goes for the shadow on the next part as well. This edge will come down. And then you see that shape. Draw the shape first if you feel like it, because it will give you a boundary, and that's always easier to make a shadow in. And again over here, there's subtle dark shadow, not too dark, right under here. Now, as we are proceeding, get rid of the lines that you don't need, especially the absolute straight lines that cut across the area that we want to shade. Here I am erasing this part. And the best bit is with a flexible eraser, you can just pick up some of that lead. Right, now at this point, it would be good to get a small piece of paper that you keep under your hand. Or if you've got an old sock, today you can use that old sock as a guard. So you cut off the foot part and make a small slit on one side so that you can insert your hand. And makes you look like a really cool ninja artist. That way, when you keep your hand down and or even go over, the chances of smudging because of the oils from the hand reduce. But if you don't have that, just take any paper that is lying around and place it under your hand and keep moving that along with your hand so that you don't smudge your work too much. All right. So I'm going to do this little bit and I'm going to then move on to the to our rope, if everyone's okay with it. If you think that it's going to be a repetition of the same thing, then we don't have to finish the whole cloth. But if you'd rather that we finish the piece of cloth, then we can do that also. I don't want to rush through. Now here again, I am shading the dark section first. So there's a shadow here, and based on that, the proportion of the shadow, I will then draw the fold on the right. So like I was saying, that what we see is very individual. And just because I see a certain shape first or find that a prominent shape to start drawing first does not mean that the same rules apply to you. You might be able to see the lines of this fold better rather than the shadow. And so you should then draw the fold which comes from here. Now this fold can also be drawn slowly. You can see how I'm drawing this line. I'm building on top of the line that I'm drawing. This is still different from drawing a line like this. It's the same movement except that it is longer lines following longer lines. I think I made this really narrow. So I'm first going to do a little bit of shadow here. Maybe this part. Now on this fold, we have a shadow here. And that is just in the same line, more or less, as the fold here. And if you, it's not a very sharp line shadow. So you can make the shadow with your shading as well. And then on the edge, you have a smoother shadow that rolls over. So often these are the shadows that make your identity of the object more crystal. What do you feel? Shall we continue with this?
Whatever the other two youngsters say.
Okay, what is the
I will just express. This is not what we should go ahead with. I have faced so far two big challenges while doing this. The first being the reference line. I'm finding it difficult to move from the reference line to the actual line.
Okay.
And secondly, while you're shading, instinctively, I want to shade in a different place or in a different sequence versus yours, but I'm trying to follow what you are doing so that I'm with you. And not like go color somewhere as in go shade somewhere else and then see oh no, but she's still doing somewhere else. So right now it's been a little bit of a brain game for me, and it feels like my brain is doing a lot of catching up.
So you can start wherever you feel comfortable. So if you see certain shapes that you know you can draw, start from there. And you can keep moving from one to the other because that could be your process. Don't challenge your process right now. And I do a certain thing a certain way today, but it's very possible that tomorrow, if I had to do the same picture, I might start from elsewhere. It doesn't matter where you start from. So you don't need to do that. Now, in terms of proportion, like I said, you will not know whether you've got the right proportion until the whole sketch is done. And this is something that you will have to encounter for every sketch for the next maybe 500 sketches. Because something or the other is out of proportion, in the wrong place, of the wrong size, or in a different shape, maybe something always seems to look odd. But unless we complete everything around it, we can't even see that it is wrong. When we shade, the darkening of a space crunches space. It's like when you're on a journey, if there are lots of stores and lots of like traveling in India, traveling for 400 kilometers in India is a much quicker journey than traveling 400 kilometers in the US. Because it is so boring. It's the same trees for so long. It's almost like blank space. There's nothing to break the space. So it seems like a very long journey just because our brain is doing nothing. But if you do the same thing in India, there are so many shops, there's so much entertainment that time moves faster. Now, in terms of illustration, my experience is that if you are just drawing lines, you cannot figure out how much space you're using. So it's like an endless space and you can make it any amount. So proportions become a little awry. And that's bound to happen because you don't know what you're drawing in blank space without shading, if that is going to be the right distance of the line or the right angle of the line. And in with respect to the other lines in the neighborhood, if it is the accurate size. The moment you start shading, things start crunching up. And if again, another analogy would be if I give you an empty box and I give you a bunch of stuff and I ask you, can you fit all of these into the box? You might do a quick area calculation and say, okay, fine, I think it can happen. And you'll start fitting it in. And either you have miscalculated the size of the box or the area occupied by the objects. So unless you do the exercise, you can't tell whether it's all fitting or not. That's exactly how it works with all these details. So the moment you put the first jar in the box, suddenly you get an idea of space. The moment you start shading a little bit or put one line over there, you start understanding whether that space is adequate or not. And it still changes. So you have drawn, if you draw your basic outline of a particular size, when you get into the detail, you might see the detail or perceive the detail smaller or larger. So there's multiple things happening. All of this is related to how we observe objects, and we want to fine tune it. So if you find yourself paralyzed, just scan through the different areas that you see the different shades and start at the place where you can shade. You can actually vocalize what that, what the shape is. Like I said, an inverse teardrop shape, or it's a circle or a round or an oval or a straight line triangle. This is a compound curve, whatever. So if you vocalize it, it becomes a little easier. I literally sometimes talk to myself, what can this be? How can I do this? Maybe this is a curve. No, but this is looking like it's going up also. So it's up also, down also. Does it start with down or start with up? It is important because these things which come instinctively after a certain point in the beginning are so confusing because you have to draw it. And you've never had to look at these so many intricacies and shapes ever before. So all the more it becomes difficult. So let's continue this. Let's not go to the rope because then that will be shifting your brain to another geography altogether while you're still negotiating with this. And take up a
But you're
small
saying,
section.
okay, should I do a shadow on the wall first? Should I do the shadow on the cloth first?
If you want to do the shadow on the wall, if that helps you, do it. I'm not going to do it. I mean, I wasn't supposed to do it for this, but do whatever you feel is going to give you momentum to move the next step forward.
Okay.
Okay, let's try it one more time.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I didn't let Livia speak only. Livia, do you want to do the rope or do you want to do this?
No, we can do this. I'm happy to do that. And let me show you the a completed version also. I just did it yesterday, so I have it. And I know it takes a lot of time. So we don't have to finish it right now, but I want to give you direction so that when you have the time, you can finish it and there aren't any questions about that. So we'll go through this.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, here's the finished version.
I should have told you don't show.
Yeah, it's like crazy.
Because then you're like, oh shit, it's nothing like that.
It'll
Oh my
come.
God.
But no, I want to show you how it started. You've seen how it started. You've seen me do this. So it's a doable task. I have not used the paper stump on this also, but you can break this down and see how I've just used a pencil very lightly over here, a little dark over here, built one texture on top of the other. That's all that has happened, right? So the progression, it's all the same technique. Chalo. Now, with renewed strength, what is that thing called? There's a poem, no? Sharda should know that. Once,
No, I don't know which one you're referring to.
so there is one, I'll tell you which one. Uh, Once again upon the breach or something like that. It'll come to me. It sounds like it's a battle cry.
It sounds really interesting.
Yeah. I will, let me just think about it. I'll tell you. So for today's task, don't concern yourself too much with the shape. Just focus on making these gentle shaded areas and building up on that. A crooked line here or there, or even those hatched lines that I'm asking you not to do. If you'll end up making that too, that's not a problem. But focus on this movement of your pencil. Just being able to touch one tip consistently and moving that back and forth to create a very gentle shadow. Even if it is a dark shadow. In fact, if it's a dark shadow, all the more better, because then you have a larger area to practice this. And you can keep going over and over it to build its depth. Once you get this trick, you will be addicted to pencil shading. Once more unto the breach. Oh, this is from Shakespeare. It's from Henry V. My God. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more. Or close the wall up with our English dead and sheathed their swords for lack of argument, that those whom you call fathers did beget you. My goodness.
Crazy Russians. I remember that one. Yeah.
So a project like that, I would recommend start it when you are traveling. So that if you have hours and hours to wait at an airport, this is one that you will really enjoy. Simply because you don't need too much to carry. You just carry a pencil along, you see the reference image on your phone, pop on your AirPods or headphones, listen to a nice crime podcast. I can recommend some nice crime podcasts also, like serial killers or something like that. And focus. It is fantastic. You will look forward to waiting for flights.
Talking about crime podcast, did you see that one?
Which one?
How to get away with murder. Oh no, only buildings. Oh, sorry, only
Only
murders in the building.
only murders in the building. Yeah, yeah. I saw the first season. I still haven't seen the second season.
That was quite fun. It
It
was
was
so
very
fun.
nice. I really enjoy, but I just enjoy those two guys. I'll watch anything. I'll watch them read the newspaper also, I think.
Yeah, those two are too cute.
Sorry, which one is this again?
Only murders in the building. This is Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez.
It's amazing. The second season is also nice.
Yeah?
Really nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All were good. I'm waiting if they. I hope they have a fourth one.
I'll watch. There are 3 seasons now. I've missed out
Yeah.
then.
There are 3 seasons, and the third season ends like on a cliffhanger again.
Again. Oh
So
my God.
yeah, so you want to like see the next thing.
Okay, okay. Chalo, done. I've been looking forward to some good thing to watch. So last night I was what I was sketching, I showed you the same thing. I had to complete it because I wanted to share the recording. You guys are going to see the same picture on your Wednesday recording. But what was I listening to? There's a new podcast I found on serial killers. This one is called Serial Killing. So this lady talks about what why people become serial killers. So she gives a very interesting background of their lives because she does more like an investigative report. Is there something in their growing years that made them serial killers? And my God, some of the stories, of course, she can get very graphic. So I fast forward through those parts. I can't listen to all that graphic violence. So just fast forward. But other than that, it's very informative. And it turns out that the Second World War produced a lot of serial killers. I mean, the king of all serial killers started it, I suppose. But there were so many in the US that for some reason came up after the Second World War. And then there's one I listen to which is hosted by a husband and wife team who are like grandparents, but they very polite, very nice, almost like radio announcers' voices, until then they start talking about how bad the serial killer was or the whatever murderer was, and then they break out into expletives, which is so cute. It looks like if you can imagine somebody very docile and trying very hard to be a potty mouth, it's really cute. But their stories are really long, and those are wonderful to listen to in traffic jams because they build up such a lovely. It's almost like a visual that they build up.
So, where would you hear these? I mean, how do you get to these podcasts on Spotify?
On Spotify, they're all on Spotify.
Okay, okay.
I'll share them with you. Put them on the.
Great, thank you. Because I really never heard podcasts like that.
Oh, this
Put
is.
it on the group, please.
Sorry?
I should put it on the group only because I'm also
I'll put it on the
always
group.
searching
Yes,
for
yes.
something.
I shall make all of you true crime junkies. So I was almost like a closet true crime listener, and I came across some podcast through NPR One. That's also very nice. I don't know if you've heard of that. So NPR is National Public Radio in the US, and they have an app called NPR One, which is mostly US related news, which you can skip. They start with that usually, but they also um, uh, play a lot of interesting podcasts, of which one is called TED Radio R. So that is from the TED Talks series. And through that, I also got to hear some of the initial crime related podcasts, which were one is called Minds of Madness. And these are not necessarily serial killers, these are any kind of killers who just maybe sometimes in a moment of passion or the usual insurance thing or whatever. And then once I started listening to that on Spotify, then Spotify started suggesting, if you like this, then why don't you try that? And that is brilliant. I love this new AI suggestion thing.
Spotify is really nice in these recommendations.
Yeah,
Once you start listening something and it keeps on giving the same recommendations.
correct.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. So then you can always give it a 15-minute try. If you like it, then many of them have a lot of episodes that you can then listen to, just like it and put it on your playlist. So that was it. Then there was one on cults. That is also very nice. And then this one is called True Crime Brewery. That's the senior couple. And they both sit with a beer. And the husband, he used to be a pediatrician. So he gives you a lot of gyan about the crime. And the wife used to be a nurse. And both of them have, for both of them, this is second marriage. So they both talk about, not too much, but once in a while they will talk about their kids. And the husband's ex-son-in-law was terrible. So he keeps ragging on him all the time. So it's very nice. It's fun to listen to them. But they can also put you to sleep because they've got very, very slow, soothing voices. So he will review a beer and he'll choose a beer from the state that the crime has occurred in. So there is some relevance to that. And then depending upon the alcohol content, either they will share the beer or then they will each have their own, then they have their own taste. And they often also, with every episode, they will read out certain case suggestions from the listening audience. And even those are wonderful. So this one episode often runs into maybe an hour and a half, that's the minimum, to sometimes even 2 hours if it's a very complicated case. They go back into the history of the perpetrator, then they right from their birth to if there's a history of the victim, they go into that. And it's fascinating. So their agenda is to talk about stories which have caused a change in the legal system or something to watch out for that people might not think. Like, for example, apparently in the US, if you are above 18 and you are missing, then they have to wait a certain number of hours. Otherwise, they just categorize you as an adult missing. But you could have been kidnapped or you could have been taken. So they have now different laws for that, and especially for senior citizens. Because a lot of people, times there are crimes against senior citizens that go unnoticed. So things like that. So it's not just about the voyeuristic pleasure of violence. Okay, how is the shading building up? Is it coming through? Anything happening?
It's okay. It's not bad.
Yeah, mine is looking kind of, it's looking like a heart. Mine is looking
Oh,
like a heart.
not
The
bad.
shape of.
Maybe a
I've
little.
run out of space for shading.
Wait, let me see this. Oh, it's coming along. Good,
Yeah.
good. That's nice. Yeah, the times like that, I feel like I want to just take everyone's and just do a few lines here or there, make little corrections.
Nice.
Nice, nice.
Really nice.
Sharda, you can build up more mid-tones. So you've got the dark, and maybe you can do a little more of the lighter tones, and you'll start getting more depth over there. Nice. So right now, yours is looking like there's a very harsh light on it. So if you smoothen the edges out a little bit, I think it should come. Just share the image with me. I'll put it on the group also, so all three of you can look at your
Okay.
images.
All
So in this case, if you are evaluating, self-evaluating, what should you look out for? At any point, you will notice that one place the area, the color or the tone, is lighter or darker. And you determine whether it's the right shade by checking in the neighborhood. So it's like in this case, I can go slightly deeper over here. So keep looking at the reference image and see how far you want to take this dark shadow. It is all determined by what is happening in the neighborhood. If you try to shade this in isolation, then you will have pockets of shading. But if you look at what's happening around that same area, you will start seeing that there is always a relationship between why a shadow is dark in one area and why it's light in another area. And that is what will make the shading look more accurate. So again, the entire fabric looks gray. We are ignoring that for now. but there is a little bit of the gray visible in this light shadow here, a little bit over here, just tiny bit over here also, because the fabric turns down inward away from the source of light. So it is going to become a little darker here. Now, I have not made the shadow dark on the behind this fold, so it is going to look odd. So I'm going to start increasing its depth. Suppose if your pencil is not that dark, in these sections, choose another pencil, get another pencil and make these dark sections. Always shade the darker sections from the center, from the middle of that area, not the edge. Because often, even if you are making a dark section, its edge is a little fuzzy and you don't want to be left with a very sharp edge over there. Now, as soon as this comes over here, there's a nice tip of light. So I can now take my eraser and create that tip. And then shade around it. And then I will give myself a nice fuzzy line over here. And a sharp line over here. And match these shadows. And this part is almost uniform, so I will shade the whole thing one uniform color. So everything can keep developing. Once I've done this area, then I can go back over here and see that maybe this can become a little darker. So you keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to make all of it seamlessly give you the same illusion. Okay. So try this out for the rest of the week. But also, if you want, I'll send some more images of fabric. And they could be just like a bag. I'll send you one with just a bag. So there are fewer lines and fewer shadows. Then maybe just a swirl of fabric or something like that, or a napkin, anything. If you have some pictures or if you have stuff at your home, just click a picture of that and sketch that also. Ideally, sketch from a picture. Don't try to sketch from real life right now. It'll drive you even more nuts. Okay. Okay,
So what would be, sorry, Aditi, what would be an application of this? Like, okay, I'll do the shading. Now what?
this is good practice for when you have to do portraiture. So say you want to
Okay.
draw a person with even just like this part, you want to
Mhm.
draw them with a shirt collar or something. Knowing how lines and shadows and fabric work, it becomes much easier. So wait, let me demonstrate. I don't have a reference image with me right now, but I'm just winging it. So if you have the face of a person like this, and you want to draw some kind of fabric around them, or even a sari for that matter. This is the shape that you would have, actually not this long, the neck. And normally people get very confused with drawing fabric. So there is you know that you have to draw folds. Then there is an inside edge and outside edge of fabric. So all this is the drawing part. Then when you're shading this, what we did right now can come in handy over here. You will have definitely a shadow over here, definitely a shadow behind the collar, but often there is a highlight in this section and then a shadow here. So there are the same things that we did right now, we can see much easier, much clearer in other stuff that we are drawing, where especially when it comes to fabric. Then, yeah, making a sharp shadow underneath the collar. And then if this is the face, edge of the face, you will have, oh, even skin for that matter. Skin also behaves like fabric, by the way. So it becomes a lot more believable. Noses, for example. Shading noses is almost like shading fabric, because it is, after all, just a sheath of fabric that covers, not sheath of fabric, sheath that covers the skeleton.
You like the way Somali is grinning away on that description.
Yeah, I was like, oh, after all, it's a sheet of fabric. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, if you think about it, okay, I'll send you one more very interesting YouTube video on the evolution of the eye. It's absolutely fascinating. The eye evolved out of literally just it was like this, if you can imagine, through evolution. And then through a sheath of skin, some cells became specialized to be able to perceive the presence of light. And then little by little, there was a small hole that developed, and then finally this very sophisticated eye. But it's so this talk is by Richard Dawkins. He's trying to explain this to certain non-believers in science, that I can give you an explanation that the eye was not created in one day by a sentient entity. That you think everything was created by. You may continue to believe that for your peace of mind, but don't stop the progress of science because of that. It's quite interesting. And this is from the 70s or 80s, I believe. Okay, so all the shading that I'm doing will be like what you would do on fabric, because there are hardly any sharp edges on the face other than the eye. The nose and mouth are almost like sheets of fabric. So it's like this. Oh, this one doesn't even have that. If I take 2 folds of fabric, this can become a mouth. So it's almost the same thing as drawing this fabric.
That was very cool.
Okay.
He's a very good-looking man.
Absolutely.
Chisel. I should draw some chub. Cool. Okay, so next week we are going to next week is what? It'll be the 6th. So I was going to start with artist studies. So next week we were going to paint a few Van Goghs, actually, at least one Van Gogh. So I would If you want to continue with pencil sketching for one more class, we can do that, or we can push it to another date. And next week, let's begin with painting. A little bit of painting won't hurt. Yeah. So then we'll go with the Van Goghs, and then we'll do the rope another time.
We can try the rope for homework.
Try it for homework. Yeah, why not? It's not rocket science.
We'll just try. Then you
It
give
remains,
us feedback.
yeah, the
Yeah.
rules remain the same. Good.
Yeah,
All
and we'll
right.
send this photo also so you can tweak on
Yes,
that.
yes.
Okay.
I'll comment on that for sure.
Yeah.
So, Sharda, shall I temporarily add you to this group so that you can be in on the conversation?
Okay.
Okay, chalo. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, girls. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.